I didn't say a word. I didn't raise my voice. I just smiled, folded my hands in my lap, and waited. My mother-in-law had no idea what was coming. Neither did my sister-in-law. And honestly, neither did I. Not fully. But I had learned a long time ago that the most powerful thing a woman can do is stay quiet when everyone expects her to fall apart. Let me tell you what happened the night my mother-in-law called my son a guest instead of family. My name is Claire. I'm 31 years old. I have a 7-year-old son named Miles, who has his father's eyes and my stubbornness, which means he is going to be just fine in this world. His father, my ex-husband Daniel, and I divorced 3 years ago. It was quiet, as divorces go. No screaming, no lawyers at each other's throats. Just two people who had grown into different shapes, sitting across from each other at a kitchen table, agreeing it was over. What was not quiet was his family's reaction to me after. Daniel's mother, Roslyn, had never fully accepted me. Even during the marriage, I was tolerated the way you tolerate a draft in a room. Everyone feels it. Nobody wants to address it, and eventually you just stop mentioning it. She loved Miles, I'll give her that. She would light up around him. But me? I was always Daniel's wife, and then after the divorce, I became something even less than that. I became the woman who had taken something from her son, even though Daniel and I had ended things mutually, even though I had never once spoken badly about him to Miles, even though I had done everything right. His sister Brianna was worse. She was 34, loud, and had a talent for making every room feel smaller. She had 2 daughters, twins named Harper and Sadie, who were 9 years old and had been raised to believe they were the center of any gathering. Brianna treated Miles the way some people treat a neighbor's kid at a birthday party, politely, distantly, with the unspoken message that he was there on borrowed time. After the divorce, I kept a respectful distance from Daniel's family. I didn't need their holidays or their opinions. Miles saw his grandmother at Daniel's house on Daniel's time. That was enough. That was the boundary I had quietly drawn for myself, and I was at peace with it. Then, in September, Roslyn called me directly. She said she was turning 65 in October and wanted to do something special. She had rented out a private dining room at a resort called the Alderton, a place about an hour outside the city, the kind of place with stone fireplaces and white tablecloths and servers who refill your water before you even notice it's getting low. She said she wanted Miles there. She said it would mean a lot to her. She said, and I remember this clearly because it surprised me, "You're still his mother, Claire. I'd like you there too." I almost said no. My gut pulled in that direction immediately, the way it always does when something feels like it might cost more than it looks. But I thought about Miles. He adored his grandmother in the uncomplicated way children adore people who give them cookies and call them by nicknames. And Roslyn was turning 65. It felt small to refuse, so I said yes. I told Miles we were going to Grammy Roslyn's birthday dinner. He asked if there would be cake. I said absolutely. He said okay and went back to his Legos. I envied that simplicity more than I can say. The drive to the Alderton was beautiful. October in that part of the state means the trees are turning, all amber and rust, and the light comes in sideways through the windshield and makes everything look like a painting. Miles pressed his face against the glass and named the colors. Burnt orange. Fire red. That one looks like a caramel apple, Mom. I laughed and agreed, and for that hour in the car, everything was easy. We arrived just after 6. The Alderton sits back from the road, long driveway, stone facade, the kind of building that announces itself without trying. A valet took the car. Miles held my hand as we walked in, which he still does sometimes in new places, and which I hope he never fully stops doing. Roslyn was already inside with Brianna, the twins, and a few of Roslyn's friends I recognized from old family photos. There were 12 people at the table in the private dining room. Long table, candles, the works. It looked beautiful. It genuinely did. Roslyn hugged Miles first, which was right. She squeezed him and said, "There's my boy," and Miles beamed. She hugged me too, briefly, and said she was glad we came. Brianna looked up from her phone, gave me a nod that meant nothing, and went back to scrolling. Then I noticed the seating. There were place cards. I had not been told about place cards. Roslyn was at the head. Brianna and the twins were clustered together on one side, close to Rosalind. The friends were spread along the middle, and at the very far end of the table, 2 chairs with no place cards, just slightly apart from the rest, like an afterthought. That was where Miles and I had been placed. I looked at it for a moment. I didn't say anything. I helped Miles into his chair, sat down beside him, and unfolded my napkin. The server came around. She was young, professional, with a warm smile. She started at Rosalind's end, taking drink orders as she moved down the table. Harper and Sadie ordered sparkling lemonade. Brianna ordered a glass of something expensive. The friends ordered wine. When the server reached us, Miles sat up very straight the way he does when he's trying to be impressive, and said, "May I please have a lemonade?" She smiled at him, the real kind, and said, "Of course." Then Brianna's voice came from the other end of the table. "Actually," she said, not quite loudly but loudly enough, "he'll just have water." The server paused. I felt the air in the room shift the way it does before a storm. I looked at Brianna. "He asked for a lemonade," I said, keeping my voice level. Brianna shrugged, not even looking up from the menu. We didn't budget for extras. There it was, that word, extras. Miles was 7 years old. He had put on his good shirt for this dinner. He had pressed his face to the car window for an hour naming tree colors. He had said, "May I please," to the server, and he was being referred to as an extra. I felt something move through me. Not rage, not yet. Something quieter and colder and more certain than rage. I looked at my son. He had heard. I could see it in the small way his shoulders came in, that particular posture children have when they've been made to feel small. He was looking down at the tablecloth. "Miles," I said quietly, "you can have whatever you'd like." Rosalind, to her credit, looked uncomfortable, but she didn't say anything. She picked up her menu. Brianna finally looked up. "Claire, I'm just saying, this dinner is expensive, and we planned it for family." She said the word family with a specific weight, a deliberate press, like she was testing whether I would flinch. I did not flinch. "He is family," I said. 2 words. Then I turned back to the server, who was standing very still with the practiced composure of someone who has seen dining room drama before, and I said, "A lemonade for my son, please. And I'll have a sparkling water with lemon." The server wrote it down and moved on. Brianna made a sound, not quite a laugh, not quite a scoff, and said something to the twins in a low voice that I didn't catch. Harper and Sadie giggled. Miles was still looking at the tablecloth. I put my hand over his under the table. He turned his palm up and held my fingers. Rosalind's friend, a woman named Patricia who I had met once at Christmas years ago, leaned slightly across the table toward Miles and said, "What grade are you in, sweetheart?" She was trying. I appreciated it. Miles looked up and said, "2nd grade," and Patricia said her grandson was in 2nd grade too, and asked if he liked dinosaurs, and Miles said actually he was more into space right now, and for a few minutes there was a small, gentle conversation happening at our end of the table that had nothing to do with Brianna. But the dinner hadn't started yet, and it was going to get worse before it got better. When the menus came, I watched the far end of the table order without looking up. Brianna ordered a seafood tower. The twins each ordered filet mignon. Rosalind ordered the rack of lamb. Nobody consulted us. Nobody passed a menu our direction. Ours had been placed directly by the server, and I realized quickly that ours were different. Not the full menu, a limited one, fewer options, lower price points. I recognized it immediately for what it was. They had arranged it in advance. I set the menu down very slowly. Miles looked at his and said, "Mom, there's no lemonade on here." He said it quietly, just to me, not making a scene, just observing. 7 years old and already protecting me from the embarrassment. That broke something open in my chest. "I know, baby," I said. "The server already has your order. I ordered the salmon." Miles ordered the pasta with butter, which is what he orders everywhere. The server took our menus and left. I sat with my water and my son and my very, very quiet composure, and I thought about the phone call I had made 3 weeks ago. Here is what I had not told Rosalind when she invited me. I work in hospitality operations. I have for 6 years. I started as a front desk associate at a mid-size hotel right out of college, moved into events coordination, then into corporate accounts management. And for the past 2 years, I have held a regional director role overseeing partnership accounts for a hospitality group that manages several properties in the state, including, as of 18 months ago, the Alderton. I did not arrange this dinner. I had nothing to do with the booking. But when Rosalind called and told me where she had made the reservation, I had recognized the name immediately. And the following Monday, I had called our regional property manager at the Alderton, a man named Stephen, just to let him know I would be coming in as a personal guest, not in a work capacity, and to please not make a fuss. Stephen, being Stephen, had said of course, and also, just so I knew, the staff would be aware I was there. I had not engineered anything. I want to be clear about that. I had not called ahead to arrange some revenge. I had simply done what any professional does when they're visiting a property in their portfolio. I had made a courtesy call. What happened after that was not something I planned. It was something that had been in motion long before Brianna decided my son was an extra. The dinner moved forward. The seafood tower arrived for the other end of the table. Harper and Sadie made a production of picking out shrimp. Brianna took photos. Rosalind smiled and laughed with her friends and was, in the way of people who compartmentalize expertly, genuinely enjoying her birthday. The distance between the two ends of the table felt like a mile. My salmon was excellent. Miles ate his pasta with the focused satisfaction of a child who has found exactly what he wanted, twirling it onto the fork the way I'd taught him, catching the drips with his spoon. We talked quietly. He told me about a book his teacher had read to the class, about a boy who builds a rocket in his backyard. He asked if people could really build rockets. I said some people do. He said he was going to build one. I said I believed him. At some point, Brianna's voice rose enough to carry down the table. She was telling one of Rosalind's friends about a vacation she was planning, a resort in the Caribbean, private villas. The twins would love it. We deserve it, she said. Real family time, you know? Just us. She didn't look at me when she said it. She didn't need to. Miles had heard. He ate another bite of pasta and didn't say anything. He was learning at 7 how to carry things quietly. I hated that he was learning it here, at this table, at his grandmother's birthday dinner. I excused myself to use the restroom. In the hallway outside the private dining room, I nearly walked into Stephen. He was not in a formal suit. The Alderton's management team dresses quietly, dark blazers, understated, but I knew him immediately and he knew me. He stopped, shook my hand, and said he was glad to see me. He asked if everything was satisfactory. I told him the food was wonderful. I told him my son was enjoying the pasta. He said he had heard. He said it the way people in hospitality say things, carefully and with complete deniability, that the reservation had been made under Rosalind's name, and that he wanted to make sure I knew that the account used for the booking was a corporate account. My company's corporate account, in fact, which had been used to make the reservation by someone in my company's events department who had worked with the Alderton before and offered the account as a courtesy. I looked at him for a moment. He looked back at me with the expression of a man who has just handed someone something very fragile and is watching to see if they'll drop it. I thanked him. I told him that I didn't want any disruption to the dinner. He said he understood completely and that the staff would of course follow my lead. I went to the restroom. I stood at the sink and ran cold water over my wrists and looked at my reflection for a moment. I thought about Miles's shoulders coming in at the word extras. I thought about the limited menu. I thought about the place cards at the far end of the table. I thought about what I would want Miles to remember about tonight. I dried my hands and went back to the table. Dessert menus came. Rosalind's end ordered generously. The chocolate souffle, the creme brulee, the birthday cake the restaurant had prepared. Our end of the table did not receive dessert menus. I noticed, said nothing. Miles asked quietly if there was going to be cake. I had promised him cake. Yes, I said, there will absolutely be cake. The birthday cake came out first, a 3-layer thing with sugar flowers that the pastry team had made beautifully. Everyone sang. Rosalind cried a little. The good kind, Miles sang along enthusiastically and slightly off-key, and Rosalind, to her credit, looked down the table at him while she blew out her candles and smiled. And that was when Stephen walked in. Not loudly, not dramatically. He simply entered the room with the contained authority of someone who manages a property and knows every corner of it. He walked the length of the table, nodded politely to the guests, and stopped beside my chair. And in the voice he uses for valued accounts, warm, clear, carrying, he said, "Ms. Murtis, Claire, I just wanted to come by personally and make sure your evening has been exceptional. We're grateful, as always, for your continued partnership with the Alderton." The room went very quiet. I looked up at him and said, "Everything has been wonderful, Stephen. Thank you." He nodded, said he hoped we would enjoy the rest of the evening, mentioned that dessert for my son and me would be on the house, and excused himself. He walked back out the way he came. I did not look at Brianna. I did not look at Brylan. I picked up my water glass, took a small sip, and asked Miles if he wanted to look at the dessert options. It was another full 30 seconds before anyone at the other end of the table said anything. Rosalind spoke first. Her voice was careful in the way voices get when someone is trying to reconstruct what just happened. "Claire," she said, "do you know the manager here?" "I do," I said. "The Alderton is in my company's portfolio. I'm the regional director for their parent group." Another silence. Brianna was very still. Harper and Sadie were looking at their phones, oblivious, which was perhaps the only mercy in the room. "You work with this resort?" Rosin asked. "I oversee the partnership account, yes," I said. "I actually recognized the name when you mentioned it on the phone. I made a courtesy call to let Stephen know I'd be here." Rosalind put her fork down. I watched something move across Brianna's face. Not guilt, exactly, more like the rapid recalculation of a person who has just realized they've been playing cards at a table where someone else has been holding the deck. She had called my son an extra at a table that existed, in part because of my professional relationship with the property. She had handed him a limited menu at a restaurant where I was a recognized partner. She had looked through me for 2 hours at a dinner I could have, if I had been a smaller person, arranged to go very differently. She opened her mouth. Then she closed it. Miles, beside me, was eating a small dish of ice cream that the server had brought quietly while the adults recalibrated. He didn't know what had just happened. He just knew the ice cream was good. He offered me a bite. I took it. The conversation at the far end of the table did not recover fully. Rosalind and her friends continued, a little more subdued. Brianna was on her phone. The twins had grown restless. When the check came, it went to Rosalind's end of the table. I watched Rosalind open it. I watched her expression shift. She looked up and then, carefully, did not look at me. The corporate account had been flagged, which was standard procedure when the account holder was present as a personal guest rather than in a work capacity, meaning the discount and the billing arrangement they had likely expected no longer applied in the same way. It was not something I had arranged. It was simply policy. But the dinner, at full price, for that many people, with the seafood tower and the filet mignon and the wine and the souffle, was not inexpensive. I left cash on the table for Miles and me, more than enough, and folded my jacket over my arm. I told Rosalind happy birthday. I meant it. She was turning 65 and she had wanted her grandson at her table, and some part of that was real, even if the rest of it had been ugly. I took Miles's hand and we walked out through the dining room, through the lobby with its stone fireplace, through the front door and into the October night. The valet brought the car. Miles climbed in and buckled his own seatbelt, which he has been doing himself for a year now and is still proud of. The trees were dark shapes against the sky. The drive home was quiet for a while. Then Miles said, "Mom?" "Yeah, baby." "That manager man knew your name." "He did," I said. "Is that because you're important?" I thought about that for a moment, about how to answer it in a way that was true and also something he could carry. "It's because I worked hard," I said, "for a long time, and I didn't let anyone make me feel like I wasn't worth the work." He was quiet for a little while. Then he said, "I'm gonna work hard too." "I know you are," I said. "Can we get a drive-through shake? I'm still a little hungry." I laughed, the real kind, from somewhere low and warm. "Absolutely," I said. We got the shakes. He got chocolate, I got vanilla, and we drove home through the dark with the windows up and the heater on and the radio playing something soft. And Miles fell asleep before we hit the highway, his head tipped sideways and his mouth slightly open. And I drove the rest of the way in the particular silence that only exists when you are carrying someone sleeping. I thought about Brianna's face when Steven said my name. I thought about the word extras. I thought about the place cards at the far end of the table. I thought about what I had said to Miles in the car, about not letting anyone make you feel like you weren't worth the work. I had said it for him, but I realized, somewhere on the dark road between the Alderton and home, that I had also needed to hear it myself. I had spent 3 years making myself small around Daniel's family, keeping the peace, not pushing back. Being the woman who divorced their son and therefore owed them something, a quietness, a diminishment, a willingness to sit at the far end of the table and accept the limited menu. I was done with that, not loudly, not dramatically. I wasn't going to call Brianna. I wasn't going to explain myself to Roslyn. I was simply going to stop showing up to tables where I was treated as a guest instead of a person, and I was going to make sure my son knew, by watching me, the way children learn everything, by watching, that we do not accept that. We don't perform smallness to make other people comfortable. We sit up straight, we say please and thank you, and we order the lemonade. Miles slept the whole way home. I carried him inside and put him in his bed with his shoes still on, because some nights that's just how it goes, and I stood in the doorway of his room for a moment, looking at him in the dark. He looked like his father around the eyes. He looked like me everywhere else. I turned off the hall light and went to make tea, and I thought, not for the first time and not for the last, that everything I have built, every account, every partnership, every quiet professional courtesy call, every hard year of work has always been for this: the kid sleeping in that room with his shoes on and his face peaceful and his whole life still ahead of him, wide open and completely unconcerned with who sits where at somebody else's table. He is not an extra. He has never been an extra, and neither, as it turns out, have I.